I'll never forget the way my heart sank that evening. I had just finished setting the table, the smell of roasted chicken still clinging to the air, when I glanced out the front window and saw it, a gleaming new SUV parked proudly in my driveway, wrapped in a giant red bow. My son stood there with his wife, their faces glowing with pride as they handed the keys to another woman. It wasn't me. It was her, my daughter-in-law's mother. They had invited me to dinner that night. Yes, but not to celebrate me. I was only the cook, the background noise, while the spotlight shone on the woman who had been in their lives for less than a year. They were calling her mom, the word that had defined my life for decades, and my own son said it with such ease that it sliced through me like glass. I stood in the kitchen, frozen, clutching the serving spoon so tightly my knuckles went white. After years of scraping and saving to raise him, after every night of overtime shifts and every holiday meal I poured my heart into, my reward was this: watching my son shower another woman with the love and generosity I thought belonged to me. And what about me? When it came time for my gift, I was handed a tiny trinket, something thoughtless, symbolic, and almost insulting. They told me it was perfect for me, as if the scraps of their affection should be enough to fill the emptiness in my chest. I smiled, because that's what mothers do. We smile even when our hearts are breaking. But deep inside, a storm was rising. The betrayal burned hotter than I expected. It wasn't just about the car or the money. It was about being pushed aside, erased, replaced in my own family. My son's laughter with his wife and her mother echoed from the driveway, and I stood alone in my kitchen, the clatter of dishes and the ticking of the clock my only companions. That night, I realized something painful, but true love can be blind. Loyalty can be fragile, and even the children we sacrifice everything for can choose someone else over us. My eyes lingered on that red bow gleaming under the porch light, and I knew this moment was going to change me. But before I tell you what I did next, you need to understand how we even got here, how years of sacrifice led to this quiet betrayal. Sometimes I think back to the small apartment where my son and I started our lives together. I was a young widow then, juggling 2 jobs and praying every night that the lights would stay on until the next paycheck came in. We didn't have much, but I gave him everything I could: my time, my strength, my love. I skipped meals so he could have seconds. I wore the same coat winter after winter so he could have a new one for school. Those years were hard, but they were also beautiful in their own way. Our home might have been cramped and drafty, but it was filled with laughter. I can still picture him running through the narrow hallway, dragging his little toy cars, leaving tiny scratch marks on the floorboards I never had the heart to sand away. We didn't have luxury, but we had each other. And for me, that was enough. As he grew older, I worked longer hours, saved every penny, and poured it all into his future. I made sure he had the chance to go to college, even when it meant I had nothing left in my savings. Watching him walk across that stage in his cap and gown felt like proof that all those sacrifices meant something. He was my pride, my reason for pushing through exhaustion, my reward for a lifetime of struggle. But now, when I look at him, I don't see that same little boy who once slipped his small hand into mine. I see a man swept up in a world of shiny cars, expensive clothes, and showy gifts. Their house is modern and cold, filled with spotless glass and sleek furniture that looks like it belongs in a magazine. But it has none of the warmth of a home. When I step inside, I feel like a guest in a hotel lobby rather than a mother in her son's life. And me, somewhere along the way, I became invisible. My phone calls go unanswered. My invitations brushed aside. I only seem to matter when they need something: a babysitter, a home-cooked holiday dinner, a quick signature on a paper I barely get the chance to read. It's those little papers that trouble me most. Documents passed across the table too quickly. Explanations that never quite add up. I've spent my life trusting, giving, believing in the people I love. But lately, I can't shake the feeling that there's something hidden beneath their smiles. And deep down, I fear that my sacrifices may not just have been forgotten, they may be taken advantage of. It started with something small, something I almost ignored. A bank statement slipped between the stack of mail on my kitchen counter. My son usually collected it for me, saying he was just helping me stay organized. But this one must have been forgotten. When I opened it, my heart skipped. There were charges I didn't recognize, transfers I never approved, strange withdrawals that didn't match the way I live. At first, I told myself it must be a mistake. Maybe the bank had mixed something up, but the amounts weren't tiny. They were large enough to make me stop breathing for a moment, and the dates matched times when my son had visited, when he had asked me to sign little papers without much explanation. I sat at the table staring at those numbers, my dinner growing cold beside me. A heaviness pressed on my chest. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't neglect. This was something else, something that carried the stench of manipulation. Later that week, I was at their house helping with the kids. I went into the study to put away some books, and there, half hidden under a folder, I saw another paper. My name was printed across the top in bold letters. Next to terms I didn't understand: asset evaluation, transfer of authority, estate planning. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Why would they be evaluating my property? Why would my estate be part of their planning while I'm very much alive? I slipped the paper back under the folder before anyone saw me, but I carried the weight of it home. That night, lying awake, I pieced together every odd moment I had brushed aside. The rushed explanations, the quick signatures, the way they avoided eye contact when I asked questions. I had chalked it up to being out of touch, to being old-fashioned. But now I saw it for what it was. It wasn't that I mattered less to them. It was that I mattered for the wrong reasons. Not as a mother, not as family, but as a source of money, of property, of security they hadn't earned themselves. The sorrow I had been carrying began to shift. It hardened into something sharper: anger, betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt a fire inside me. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was alert, watching, listening, because now I knew this wasn't just neglect. This was a plan, a scheme that had been unfolding right under my nose. And if I didn't stop it, I could lose everything I had worked my entire life to build. I told myself that the next time I saw them, I would bring it up. No more silence. No more pretending. I needed to know the truth, even if it shattered what little was left between us. I finally gathered the courage to bring it up. My hands were shaking as I sat across from them at the dining table, the same table where I had once served birthday cakes and Thanksgiving turkeys. I told them I had noticed charges on my account that didn't belong to me, papers with my name I never remembered signing. I wasn't accusing, I was asking, pleading for clarity. But the look they shared made my stomach turn. My son leaned back, giving a weary sigh. while his wife plastered on that polite smile I'd come to dread. Instead of answers, I was given reassurances, the kind that feel like a pat on the head. They told me I must be mistaken, that I was worrying too much. They said I probably didn't remember signing because I had so many things on my mind. And in that moment, their words burrowed under my skin. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to think I was wrong, that maybe age was catching up to me, that I had simply forgotten. Their calm, dismissive tone made me question my own sanity. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe my mind wasn't as sharp as it used to be. The room seemed smaller as they spoke, their voices echoing like a verdict. My son looked at me with pity, not respect, and I felt myself shrinking, as if I were no longer the woman who raised him, but a burden they had to manage. It broke something inside me, hearing my own child dismiss me so easily, siding with his wife's explanations instead of my concerns. But just as I was about to swallow their version of reality, something caught my eye. On the counter behind them lay an envelope addressed to the appraisal company. My name was on it, clear as day, the same company listed on that paper I had seen in their study. They noticed me looking and quickly shuffled it away, but not before I registered the confirmation. In that instant, everything inside me shifted. Their reassurances were lies. Their pity was a mask. And the confusion I felt was not a symptom of age, it was the result of deliberate manipulation. I nodded along, pretending to accept their words. But deep inside, I knew better. I knew I could no longer trust what they told me. I had to find the truth myself, even if it meant uncovering things I wasn't ready to face. So I smiled faintly, thanked them for explaining, and left the table quietly. But in my heart, I was already planning. This wasn't over. I thought I had seen the worst of it, but I was wrong. The truth was far darker than I ever imagined. It began when I went searching through the drawer where I keep my personal papers. I wanted to reassure myself, to make sure everything was in order. But what I found instead made my hands go cold. Nestled among old utility bills and medical records was a copy of a document I had never signed yet. There it was, with my name scrawled across the bottom. A power of attorney form, granting my son full authority over my finances. The signature looked like mine, but I knew my own hand. I had written my name 1,000 times across report cards, rent checks, birthday cards. This wasn't mine. It was a forgery close enough to fool someone who didn't know me, but not close enough to fool me. I sat there staring at it, the paper trembling in my hands. My son, my only child, had allowed this to happen. Maybe he hadn't written it himself, but he was complicit. He had to be. No one else stood to gain from it. Once I saw that, the other pieces began falling into place. The unexplained withdrawals on my bank statements, the property appraisal I never authorized, even the insurance documents I vaguely remembered being rushed through signatures I thought were routine, but now seemed suspect. Every memory I had brushed aside came rushing back, now sharper, clearer, and unmistakably sinister. Then came the final blow. A notice from the mortgage company slipped into my mailbox by mistake, addressed to my son and daughter-in-law. It mentioned a second mortgage approved 3 months earlier. The amount was $7,000, eerily close to the appraisal figure I had overheard. They had leveraged their own house, gambling with money they didn't have. And worse, it was all timed perfectly with their push to get access to mine. My chest tightened as the realization sank in. This wasn't neglect. It wasn't misunderstanding, it was a plan, a calculated, systematic effort to drain me of everything I owned, and I had been walking right into it. For a few minutes, I couldn't breathe. The grief was overwhelming, heavier than anything I had carried before. Betrayal has a weight unlike any other. It presses down until you feel smaller, weaker, foolish for ever believing in the people you trusted most. But then something shifted in me. As the tears dried, a fire lit up inside. I had spent a lifetime surviving working long nights, holding my family together with scraps and determination. If they thought I was weak, they were wrong. I wasn't about to let my entire life's work be stolen by the very people I had raised. I began connecting the dots like an investigator. The forged document proved intent. The appraisal showed they were preparing to liquidate assets. The second mortgage revealed their desperation. Each piece painted the picture of a scheme, not a mistake. And once I saw it, I knew I couldn't stay passive. I wasn't just a mother now. I was a woman with nothing left to lose, and that makes a person dangerous. So I started planning, quietly, carefully, methodically. I would gather proof. I would play along just enough to see how far they would go. And when the time came, I would be ready to turn the tables. They thought I was just an old woman. They thought I was naive. But soon, they would see that I had learned more from a lifetime of struggle than they ever realized. And this time, the fight would be mine. The day I decided to set the trap, I dressed with care. A soft sweater, a touch of lipstick, nothing too bold. I wanted to look like the woman they believed me to be: gentle, trusting, easy to persuade. Inside, though, I was steel. Every smile I wore was calculated. Every nod was part of my plan. I invited them over for coffee, letting my voice tremble just enough to sound uncertain. I told them I had been thinking about their suggestions, that maybe they were right about me needing help with my finances. I watched their eyes light up as they leaned in, already tasting victory. They thought I was folding, finally bending to their will. What they didn't know was that I had a small recorder hidden beside me, tucked beneath the doily on the end table. Each word they spoke was being captured. Every false reassurance, every manipulative phrase. They brought more papers, thick stacks with complicated language meant to overwhelm me. I ran my fingers over them slowly, feigning confusion, asking the kind of innocent questions they expected from me. All the while, I was buying time, pushing them to explain their plan in detail, coaxing out the very evidence I needed. And they gave it to me. Oh, how freely they spoke when they believed I was compliant. They talked about transferring property, about liquidating assets, about securing my future in ways that sounded more like stripping me of everything I had. My son's voice wavered at times, but his wife's rang clear, sharp, confident. She was the architect, and he was following her lead. I let them go on, nodding, smiling faintly, playing the part of the foolish old woman. But inside, my heart pounded with both dread and resolve, because I knew that soon the game would be mine. When the moment felt right, I set my pen down and leaned back. I told them, in the calmest voice I could muster, that I wanted to be absolutely sure before I signed anything. That was when I reached under the doily and pulled out the recorder. I pressed stop, and the silence in the room was deafening. The color drained from their faces. My son stammered. His wife froze, her mask cracking for the first time. I placed the device gently on the table and said nothing. I didn't need to. The truth was already there, captured in their own voices. I laid out the other papers I had collected: the forged signature, the appraisal notice, the bank withdrawals, piece by piece. I spread their lies before them like cards on the table. With every sheet of evidence, their confidence crumbled. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking. I wasn't the one doubting myself. They were. And it felt like reclaiming a part of me they had tried so hard to erase. When I told them I had already spoken to a lawyer and that the authorities would be very interested in these recordings, the silence turned heavy with fear. My son's eyes filled with tears, but his wife's hardened into something colder. Still, it didn't matter. The power had shifted. Justice wasn't just about courts and police. It was about truth being dragged into the light, about the balance of power being restored. And in that moment, I knew I had taken back control of my life. They thought they were playing chess with a helpless old woman, but they had underestimated me. And now, the game was over. In the weeks that followed, the storm slowly settled. The evidence I had gathered was more than enough to stop their scheme. My son and his wife were forced to face the truth of what they had done, not only to me, but to themselves. Lawyers became involved, and though I could have pursued the harshest punishments, I chose a different path. I wanted accountability. Yes. But I also wanted healing. My son broke down more than once, realizing the weight of his choices. His wife held on to her pride longer, but even she could not deny the recordings or the forged papers. They were caught in their own web, and I no longer carried the burden of doubt. Justice had been served, not in revenge, but in truth laid bare. For me, the greatest victory was not in legal outcomes, but in the restoration of my own dignity. I no longer felt invisible. I no longer questioned my own mind. I had proven to them and to myself that I was still strong, still capable, still worthy of respect. I found peace in my home again. The same walls that had once echoed with betrayal now gave me comfort. I filled my days with small joys, tending my garden, baking bread, talking with neighbors who reminded me that love can still be found in simple kindness. When I look back now, I don't see only betrayal. I see survival. I see the quiet strength that carried me through years of hardship rising up once again when I needed it most. And I see the lesson clearer than ever. Money, property, possessions, those things can be stolen, spent, or lost. But integrity, respect, and love, those are priceless. And once broken, they are the hardest to repair. If there's anything I want you to take from my story, it's this: never let anyone convince you that your worth can be measured in dollars or deeds. Stand firm in who you are, even when those closest to you try to diminish you. Your voice matters, your dignity matters, and your story matters. And now, I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment when someone you trusted tried to take advantage of you? How did you find the strength to rise above it? Share your thoughts or stories in the comments. I promise I will read them. Because in the end, sharing our truths is how we remind each other that we are not alone.